Pittsburgh Trivia is a production of Warrior House Media.
Welcome to Pittsburgh Trivia with your host, Jim Cannon, where uncovering the crazy truth and trivia about Pittsburgh is just the beginning. And who knows, you may even learn a few things in the process. We know life can get pretty interesting around Pittsburgh. Speaking of interesting, did you know that?
Hi, and welcome to Pittsburgh Trivia, an interactive show that will test your knowledge of all things Pittsburgh and the surrounding region. I'm your host, Jim Cannon. Thanks for joining me. Before we jump in to test your brain, please take note of our website, pittsburghtriviapodcast.com, where you can go to find the latest episode, and you can also subscribe to be notified when those episodes are posted. The show is absolutely free. So here's how Pittsburgh Trivia works. 2 rounds of 5 questions each, and then one final, slightly tougher question at the end. That's a grand total of 11 questions about our magnificent city. For each round, I will read the question and give a 5-second pause before going on to the next one. At the end of each round, I'll repeat each question before revealing the answers, along with some supplemental information. So you can have fun, tap into your own knowledge, and learn some things along the way. So those are the rules. If you're ready, let's get started. Round 1, question 1. This ice cream confection, a square of vanilla ice cream coated in a thin layer of chocolate, and using a polar bear as its logo, is often and erroneously tagged as a Pittsburgh invention. But it was actually created in Ohio. What is it? Question 2. In 2001, after a close call on a Jason Kendall hit in which he was called out, Pittsburgh Pirates manager Lloyd McClendon went onto the field and committed a baseball crime by stealing what? Question 3. These 2 Pittsburgh-born rappers both attended Taylor Alderdice High School. Who are they? Question 4. On April 24th, 1980, WTAE personality and former host of Bowling for Dollars, Nick Perry, along with 2 station employees and several state employees, went down in Pennsylvania history and went to prison for rigging this. And question 5. Requiem is a French word meaning shark. The USS Requiem, docked at the Science Center near Rivers Casino, is not a shark, but it is a what? All right, that's it for the round 1 questions. I know for some of these you had to blow the dust off the old memory bank. So let's see how you did. Here are the answers for round 1. Question 1, this ice cream confection, a square of vanilla ice cream coated in a thin layer of chocolate and using a polar bear as its logo, is often and erroneously tagged as a Pittsburgh invention. But it was actually created in Ohio. What is it? The Klondike Bar. It was created by the Isley Dairy Company of Mansfield, Ohio. And yes, it's that Isley's. The Klondike Bar made its way into Pittsburgh sometime in the 1920s. But no, sadly, it's not a Pittsburgh creation. It just became so popular here that a lot of people associate it with the city. Question 2. In 2001, after a close call on a Jason Kendall hit in which he was called out, Pirates manager Lloyd McClendon went onto the field and committed a baseball crime by stealing what? You might remember this. He stole first base. And when I say he stole it, I mean he literally reached down, lifted the base out of the ground, and walked back to the dugout with it. Did it change the call? No. But it did make for some interesting baseball coverage. And if you want to see it, if you want to see the video clip, it is available online. All you have to do is type in Lloyd McClendon, first base. And question 3, these 2 Pittsburgh-born rappers both attended Taylor Alderdice High School. Who are they? Wiz Khalifa, and Mac Miller. Miller actually attended Winchester Thurston for a period of time, but did end up graduating from Taylor Alderdice. Sadly, he died in 2018 of a drug overdose. As for Khalifa, his biggest hit was Black and Yellow, sort of a tribute anthem to Pittsburgh. In question 4. On April 24th, 1980, WTAE personality and former host of Bowling for Dollars, Nick Perry, along with 2 station employees and several state employees, went down in Pennsylvania history and went to prison for rigging this: the Pennsylvania Lottery. Well, to be specific, it was the daily number. And in an odd twist, they went with the number 666. Not sure if they meant that or if it was the galaxy kind of reflecting their deed. So they were doing the Pennsylvania lottery drawing live on TV, on WTAE. And this is back when they had actual balls in those clear plastic things that blew air into them, and then they would open up a little door at the end of a tube, and one of the number balls would come out. Well, Perry had gone in ahead of time and swapped out a bunch of the ping pong balls with new weighted ones, except the numbers 4 and 6. His genius co-conspirators had run around the day before buying large quantities of tickets in various combinations of 4 and 6, and that's what kind of set off alarm bells with people. When they did the drawing live, 3 of the weighted balls came out, and the payout that night across the state, well, it was a staggering $3.5 million. Perry ended up going to prison for about 2 years. Absolutely not worth it for that amount of money. In question 5, Requien is a French word meaning shark. The USS Requien, docked at the Science Center near Rivers Casino, is not a sand shark, but it is a what? It is a submarine, a World War II era sub, to be exact. It was launched January 1st, 1945, and promptly headed to Hawaii to join the fleet. And it had been there just a few weeks when it was called back to the States and ended up being used for about the next 20 years or so in primarily training and support functions. In addition to patrols up and down the East Coast, the boat did deploy to Europe and the Mediterranean multiple times. The sub was decommissioned in 1968 and taken over by a nonprofit in Tampa that docked it near the University of Tampa as a tourist attraction. Ultimately, that nonprofit folded, and in 1990, Senator John Hines introduced a bill to allow the sub to be transferred to the Pittsburgh Science Center, where it still resides. All right, hey, if you're keeping score, I hope you got 5 out of 5. But if not, don't sweat it. This is all for fun, and round 2 is right around the corner. When you have a few minutes, please consider stopping by our website, pittsburghtriviapodcast.com, where you can find all the episodes along with links to the other platforms that host the show. Some people just prefer one over the other, like when they're driving, or maybe you have a personal subscription to one of those platforms. So please go check it out. You can also reach us directly using the contact button located at the bottom of our homepage. We'd love to hear from you and get some feedback on how we're doing. Thank you. All right, here we go with round 2. Round 2, question 1. Where the Fort Pitt and Fort Duquesne bridges merge into each other, there's a pedestrian bridge underneath them that connects downtown to Point State Park. What is the name of that connecting bridge? Question 2. Looking like a giant light bulb protruding above the skyline in Forest Hills, the Van de Graaff generator, better known as the atom smasher, played a vital role in the early days of nuclear physics and the nation's development of nuclear energy. Emblazoned on the side was the logo of the company that built and owned it. What company was it? Question 3. If a Pittsburgher old-timer's talking about sports or large-scale events in the not-so-distant past and refers to the Igloo. What building are they talking about? Question 4. This complex of buildings, once a bustling hub of retail and restaurants in the 1980s and 90s, sits on the land formerly occupied by the Pittsburgh and Lake Erie Railroad. And question 5. This composer was born in Cleveland but grew up in Aliquippa. Some of his best-known musical scores included the theme from the Peter Gunn TV show, the Pink Panther theme song for that film series, and the song Moon River from the movie Breakfast at Tiffany's. Who was he? All right, that's it for the round 2 questions. The Igloo question had to be the freebie. It had to for that round. At least I would hope so. But we'll see. Let's check the answers. Round 2, question 1. Where the Fort Pitt and Fort Duquesne bridges merge into each other, there is a pedestrian bridge underneath them that connects downtown to Point State Park. What is the name of the connecting bridge? It's called the Portal Bridge. It's that short stretch when you come off Fort Pitt and you're headed north toward the stadium where the road kind of dips down. Underneath that is the pedestrian walkway to the point. It's like an arched bridge, and it has water on both sides, and you have to cross it to get to the point. See, I bet you didn't even know it had an actual name. And frankly, I didn't either until I put this question together. Question number 2. Looking like a giant light bulb protruding above the skyline in Forest Hills, the Van de Graaff generator, better known as the Atom Smasher, played a vital role in the early days of nuclear physics and the nation's development of nuclear energy. Emblazoned on the side was the logo of the company that built and owned it. What company was it? It's the big W we all grew up with around town, Westinghouse. The so-called Atom Smasher, or what we would now call a particle accelerator, went into operation in 1937 and operated until 1958. And then it just sort of sat there smashing nothing. And I'm not sure the year, but in the mid-2000s, a land developer knocked down the building where the smasher resided. It sat on top. As a result, the smasher fell to its side. And there was a promise that it would be restored and maybe moved somewhere due to its historic significance, but that has not yet happened. What we see is the light bulb shape, but that's really just an outer shell for what was the machinery inside of that thing. What a sad end to such an important piece of Pittsburgh and world history. Question 3. If a Pittsburgher old-timer is talking about sports or large-scale events in the not-so-distant past and refers to the Igloo, what building are they talking about? That would be the Civic Arena. See, that was your freebie for this episode. And if you're too young to remember or new to the city and don't get it, it's because the Civic Arena, which isn't there anymore, built in the 1960s as a multi-use venue, was kind of round and it looked like a big silver igloo. And the Penguins used to play there. Question 4. This complex of buildings, once a bustling hub of retail and restaurants in the 1980s and 1990s, sits on the land formerly occupied by the Pittsburgh and Lake Erie Railroad. And that is Station Square. The building where the Grand Concourse restaurant is located was once the main terminal building for the railroad, the actual passenger station for the railroad. It was almost torn down in the 1970s to make way for, among other things, a cemetery. But in 1976, the Pittsburgh History and Landmarks Foundation took over the site, started to redevelop it, and the rest is history. I remember back in about the mid-'80s, it was a really fun place to go. Station Square, a really vibrant destination with a bunch of bars and restaurants and amazing little shops and clothing stores. Sad to say that over the years, it's gone downhill in many respects. But the Grand Concourse is a beautiful building, and the little bar attached to it, called the Gandy Dancer. That's a great place to just have a beer and some food and catch a game. In question 5, this composer was born in Cleveland but grew up in Aliquippa. Some of his best-known musical scores included the theme from the Peter Gunn TV show, the Pink Panther theme song for the film series, and the song Moon River from the movie Breakfast at Tiffany's. Who was he? Henry Mancini. And he also wrote the music for a bunch of TV shows, and here's one I never knew. He wrote the theme music for the viewer mail portion of Late Night with David Letterman. His family moved to Beaver County when he was a little kid. Both his parents were Italian immigrants, and Mancini's dad was a laborer at J&L Steel Company and also an amateur musician. But Henry Mancini had a pretty amazing life, including his time in the military toward the end of World War II, when he helped liberate the Mauthausen concentration camp in Austria. It would take 20 minutes to simply read you everything the guy did in his time on Earth. All right, that does it for round 2. Some of those questions were definitely for some of you seasoned folks, but the cool thing is, the questions show how intricate and colorful Pittsburgh has been and continues to be. And the more we do on this show, the more we learn. It's a fun journey. You ready for the bonus question? Okay, this one is a history question going back to the 1930s. With that in mind, here we go. There's a small bronze plaque on the side of the old Horns department store building at Penn and Stanwyck Street. The plaque denotes 46 feet and features the date March 18th, 1936. There's also one on St. Mary's Church downtown, Wood Street Commons, and even the now former Post-Gazette building. For what 1936 event are those plaques significant? And this was a good question for you history buffs, and you can actually go down there and still see these plaques. The answer is the March 1936 flood that hit Pittsburgh. It is often cited as the St. Patrick's Day flood, but actually the water crested the day after on March 18th. The 46 feet was the high water mark for the river. There are actually photographs of people downtown in boats, like in the center of the city itself, just paddling away. And as we see every year or so on 376 in the now infamous bathtub section, along with the massive flooding that happened in April of this year, flooding isn't new to the city, and there have been 4 major floods that impacted the center of the city over the years. But the 1936 flood caused a lot of damage, and sadly 36 people lost their lives. But there was a silver lining to that, kind of. The tragedy did resurrect conversations by the federal government regarding floods and eventually pushed the passage of the Flood Control Act, which then led to more prevention strategies around the country. And that's it for this episode of Pittsburgh Trivia. Let your Pittsburgh circle know about the show, and we'll keep sharing the trivia. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
What? You're never gonna believe this. We'll leave that nugget for next time. So if you want more wacky Pittsburgh trivia, be sure to subscribe and we'll invite you back to our next episode. But if you just can't wait, visit our website at pittsburghtriviapodcast.com, where we think Pittsburgh trivia isn't trivial.